A promise is a promise. I promise. As the sixth item on my summary of the Old Testament message that I gave you in the April 2017 issue of this newsletter, I said this. 6. Because the sons of Israel failed to adhere to the requirements of both the first and second Mosaic covenants the prophets Jeremiah and Ezekiel promised them, God would offer a new covenant to the individual members of corporate Israel. He did that through the ministry of John the Baptist. But the new covenant that the Jews accepted at that time was just like the first old covenant their ancestors had accepted at Mount Sinai. It provided no means of atonement. If a person sinned, he would immediately be cut off from corporate Israel. So God cut off from corporate Israel all the members of corporate Israel other than Jesus Christ, because they could not keep the terms of the new covenant. I have also explained these things in Not All Israel is Israel. Let me begin by reiterating the first thing that is absolutely essential to an accurate understanding of the things that Moses wrote, with regard to God's legal agreement with the sons of Israel. God signed on to 3 covenants, legal agreements, with the sons of Israel. They are these. 1. The first legal agreement that God offered at Mount Sinai is described in Exodus chapter 21, verse 1, through chapter 31, verse 18. The terms of that legal agreement made all the sons of Israel one person, corporate Israel. That one person held title to every part of the promise that God handed down to Adam and Eve when he banned them from the Garden of Eden. But God did not provide any means of atonement under the terms of that agreement. If one member of Israel sinned, every member of Israel was guilty of his sin. Therefore, when the sons of Israel broke the legal agreement by worshipping the golden calf that Aaron made, God rejected the entire group, except Moses. 2. The second legal agreement that God offered at Mount Sinai is described in Exodus chapter 32, verse 1, through chapter 40, verse 38. When Moses begged God to spare the sons of Israel and not destroy them, the Lord agreed to ratify a second legal agreement with the sons of Israel. But he did not make the second legal agreement directly with the sons of Israel, he made it with Moses, and he made Moses the sole member of corporate Israel, with the sons of Israel grafted into corporate Israel as members of Moses. That is, Moses was in much the same position as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had been, when they were the heir of the promise. The only difference was, corporate Israel had already been established as the heir of the promise, under the terms of the first legal agreement. Therefore, Moses became the sole member of that corporate body. Under the terms of the second legal agreement, God also allowed atonement for sin, so that although corporate Israel was still held guilty for the sin of each individual member, the individual members could retain their position in the corporate body, by following the sacrificial rituals that Moses established. 3. The third legal agreement that God offered the sons of Israel is described in Deuteronomy chapter 27, verse 1, through chapter 32, verse 52. Shortly before Moses died, the Lord laid out the terms under which Moses, as the sole member of corporate Israel, would hand down the promise to the sons of Israel, so that they individually became members of corporate Israel, rather than members of Moses. Under the terms of that legal agreement, the most significant change was to the priesthood. The entire tribe of Levi replaced the sons of Aaron as priests, and they were given the responsibility of handing down the teaching of Moses, from one generation to the next. Now that you have that information firmly fixed in your mind, you also need to understand the significance of several passages of Scripture, before you can read and understand what the prophets Jeremiah and Ezekiel said about the new covenant. The first passage essential to your accurate understanding of the message of the Scriptures is Leviticus chapter 26. Leviticus chapter 26, verses 1 through 46, my interim translation. You must not make worthless things for yourselves, and you must not raise up a graven image or a matzebah for yourselves, and you must not put down a wishing stone in your land to prostrate yourselves to it, because I am His Majesty, your God. You must observe my Sabbaths, and you must fear my sanctuary. I am His Majesty. If you walk in my statutes and observe my commandments, and act in accordance with them, then I will give your rainfalls in their time, so that the earth gives her produce and the tree of the field gives his fruit. Then threshing will attain until grape harvest for you, and grape harvest will attain until sowing, and you will eat your bread to satisfaction and dwell securely in your country. Then I will give peace on the earth so that you lie down, and there will not be anyone causing trembling. Then I will make a bad animal keep Sabbath away from the earth, and a sword will not pass through your country. Then you will pursue your enemies, and they will fall before you by the sword. Then 5 of you will pursue 100, and 100 of you will pursue 10,000, and your enemies will fall before you by the sword. Then I will face toward you, and I will make you bear fruit and make you many, and I will confirm my legal agreement with you. Then you will eat the old, what has become old, and you will bring out the old because of the new. Then I will put my residence in your midst and my soul will not detest you. And I will move about in your midst, and I will be your God, and you will be my people. I am His Majesty, your God, the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt, from being their slaves. And I broke the yoke bars of your yoke, and I made you walk standing upright. But if you do not listen to me and you do not act in accordance with all of these commandments, and if you reject my statutes, and if your soul detests my judgments, so as not to act in accordance with all of my commandments, so as to make my legal agreement null and void, I will definitely deal with you about this, and I will appoint over you a sudden overwhelming terror, both the emaciation and the inflammation, that finish off the eyes and make the soul pine away. Then you will sow your seed to empty it out, and your enemies will consume it. Then I will set my face against you, and you will be struck down before your enemies, and those who hate you will exercise authority over you, and you will flee when there is not anyone pursuing you. But if you do not listen to me during these things, then I will continue to admonish you 7 times for your sinful activity. Then I will break the pride of your strong one and make your sea of waters like iron and your earth like bronze. Then your power will be completed for emptiness, and your land will not put forth its produce, and the tree of the land will not put forth its fruit. But if you walk with me, in opposition to me and are not willing to listen to me, then I will add 7 times more of my attack against you, in accordance with your sinful activity. And I will let the animal of the open field go free and send him among you, and he will bereave you of your children and completely cut off your beasts and reduce you to nothing, so that your ways are devastated. But if you do not accept admonishment from me by these things, but you walk with me in opposition to me, then I will definitely walk with you in opposition to you, and I will also strike you 7 times for your sinful activity. Then I will bring upon you a sword that is going to take vengeance for the legal agreement. Then you will be rounded up into your cities, and I will let an epidemic go into your midst, and turn you over to the hand of an enemy. When I break the staff of your bread, then 10 women will bake your bread in one oven and bring your bread back by weight, so that you eat and are not satisfied. But if you do not listen to me because of this, but walk with me in opposition to me, then I will walk with you in a raging opposition to you, and I will definitely admonish you sternly, 7 times for your sinful activity. Then you will eat the flesh of your sons, and you will eat the flesh of your daughters. So I will wipe out your high places and completely cut up your incense altars. Then I will put your dead bodies on top of the dead bodies of your idols, and my soul will detest you. Then I will make your cities a ruin and devastate your sanctuaries, and I will not smell your soothing aromas. And I will devastate your land, so that your enemies, those who dwell in it, will be devastated because of it. And I will spread you out among the Gentiles and marshal a sword behind you, so that your land becomes a desolate area and your cities become a ruin. At that time, the land will take great pleasure in its Sabbaths all the days that it is devastated, while you are in the land of your enemies. At that time, the land will keep Sabbath and take great pleasure in its Sabbaths. All the days of being devastated it will keep the Sabbaths that it did not keep Sabbath on your Sabbaths, while you were dwelling on it. But then I will bring despondency into the heart of those among you, who remain as a remnant in the lands of their enemies. Then the sound of foliage being blown away will pursue them. So they will flee, fleeing a sword, and they will fall when there is no one pursuing. And they will stumble each one over his brother like those fleeing from the edge of the sword, when there is no one pursuing, and you will not have an ability to stand before your enemies. Then you will go to hell among the Gentiles, and the earth of your enemies will consume you. So those among you who remain as a remnant will rot away because of their reprehensible activity in the lands of their enemies, and because of the reprehensible activity of their fathers, they will definitely rot away with them. So they must confess their reprehensible activity, and the reprehensible activity of their fathers, by their betrayal of trust when they betrayed my trust, and definitely when they walked with me in opposition to me. I will definitely walk with them in opposition to them, and bring them into the land of their enemies, or their uncircumcised heart will be subdued at that time, and they will make amends for their reprehensible activity at that time. Then I will remember my legal agreement with Jacob, and I will definitely remember my legal agreement with Isaac, and definitely my legal agreement with Abraham, and I will remember the land. But the land will be abandoned because of them, and it will take great pleasure in its Sabbaths while devastated because of them. But they must make amends for their reprehensible activity, for the simple reason that they rejected my judgments, and their soul detested my statutes. But by all means even after this, when they are in the land of their enemies, I will not reject them, and I will not detest them so as to finish them off, so as to make my legal agreement with them null and void, because I am His Majesty their God. But I will remember for them the legal agreement with the first ones, those that I brought out of the land of Egypt in the sight of the Gentiles, to become their God. I am His Majesty. These are the statutes and the judgments and the teachings that His Majesty granted between Himself and the sons of Israel at Mount Sinai by the hand of Moses. The basic takeaways from that chapter are fairly easy to understand, unless you have your own theological axe to grind. If you do, you may want to stop reading right here and go back to reviewing whatever theological propaganda you have already received. You are most likely not open to considering anything other than what you have already chosen to believe to be true. But for the benefit of those who are not quite so closed-minded, here are a few things one should make note of in the text of Leviticus chapter 26. 1. Every last statement in the passage is addressed to the sons of Israel as individuals. I have indicated that by translating every plural form of the second-person personal pronoun with a lowercase u, and bolding every occurrence of it. If the statements in the passage were addressed to corporate Israel, I would have translated the pronoun, you, with an initial cap, you, to indicate the statements are addressed to corporate Israel, instead of the sons of Israel as many individuals. 2. The promise stated in verses 11 and 12 is clearly conditioned on the people fulfilling the conditions on which the promise is based. You need to keep that in mind, simply because the text of the scriptures make it abundantly clear that did not happen at any time during the Old Testament history of the sons of Israel. You also need to keep in mind the fact that the tabernacle was already in the midst of the sons of Israel at that time. The point being, the promise stated in verse 11 is not talking about God dwelling in the tabernacle among the sons of Israel at that time. It is instead speaking in terms of a time when the individual members of corporate Israel would finally get their act together and do what God required. 3. The promise stated in verses 44 and 45 explains what God intends to do after the sons of Israel have violated the terms of the legal agreement they accepted at Mount Sinai, thereby making that legal agreement null and void. At that time, God says He is going to go back to the terms He stipulated under the first legal agreement He offered the sons of Israel, when He brought them out of Egypt. Make note of what I just told you. It is extremely important. That is because God did not offer any provision for atonement under the terms stipulated in the first legal agreement. Just to emphasize it for you once again, here are the two promises God made the sons of Israel through Moses on the occasion described in Leviticus 26. Leviticus chapter 26, verses 11 through 12, my interim translation. Then I will put my residence in your midst and my soul will not detest you. And I will move about in your midst, and I will be your God, and you will be my people. Leviticus chapter 26, verses 44 through 45, my interim translation. But by all means, even after this, when they are in the land of their enemies, I will not reject them, and I will not detest them so as to finish them off, so as to make my legal agreement with them null and void, because I am His Majesty their God. But I will remember for them the legal agreement with the first ones, those that I brought out of the land of Egypt in the sight of the Gentiles to become their God. I am His Majesty. When read in the context of the second legal agreement God made with the sons of Israel at Mount Sinai, the first of those two promises is clearly conditioned on the individual members of Moses who, if you remember, was the only member of corporate Israel at the time adhering to all of the terms stipulated in the legal agreement. The second promise is completely unconditional. God is going to do it no matter what. Keep that in mind if you want to understand what God had planned for the future. If you don't, you won't.